Welcome to Lair of the Alchemist, and welcome to a brand new series called Monster Movie Monday. This is where we're going to get together with you to talk about cool horror movies that have cool soundtracks to them. And for our very first episode, I have a special guest with me, Mike. Thank you for joining me here at the Lair, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
We are going to be talking about, maybe the ultimate slasher, one of the first big slasher movies, a classic, Halloween, the first Halloween movie, 1978. And we're going to also be talking about the soundtrack to the movie too, because the soundtrack is as iconic in some ways as the movie itself. So Mike is a collector of horror vinyl, and we're going to be doing a video in the future showing off some of his horror vinyl collection. He has a few Halloween vinyls over here that he's going to show us. He's got a John Carpenter anthology. Very cool. Yep. And he's got the Halloween 3 soundtrack. Neither one of us have the original Halloween soundtrack. That fetches quite a price on eBay, so I'll have to keep my eyes out, see if maybe we'll come across it somewhere. But all right, so Mike, the Halloween movie. Let's talk about the soundtrack first. The Halloween theme might be the Michael Myers theme. Might be one of the most recognizable horror themes out there. Maybe up there with Jaws.
It has
I would
to be.
say, right. As soon as you hear it, you know what it is
For sure.
and it's one of those things that it's what's also interesting about the soundtrack is its simplicity. When it was done, the keyboard sounds that he's using, you got to remember this is 1978 when the movie came out. So the sounds that he's using, this is before computers and stuff like that. So he's using all analog synthesizers and stuff. So it's all very simple sounds, but it's done so effectively, and it adds so much atmosphere to the movie.
Definitely. The one thing I could compare it to is the tubular bells from The Exorcist. It's very reminiscent.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't think of that. And it's interesting, as we were preparing for this, I was doing a little research, and I saw that when John Carpenter, because he also directed and wrote and did the music for this, which is interesting in of itself that he did all of those. But when he first drafted the movie and I guess took it to whoever was going to release it for him, they didn't like it. They said, I don't know, this isn't scary. This isn't doing anything for us. And at that point, he didn't have the music in there. So he went away for 3 days, I think they said, and he came up with all these little themes and everything. And it made, it totally transformed the movie and totally changed it.
Definitely.
This theme is when I was rewatching the movie, getting ready for this video, my 10-year-old son walked through the room and he recognized it. Now he's never seen the movie, and he was like, "Oh, that's that horror movie theme,"
Sure.
Yeah, because he's. And I asked him, "Hey, where did you hear that?" And he goes, "Oh, I've heard it on YouTube, and people use it on YouTube." And he goes, "I just know it's that guy with the mask." He didn't know the name of the movie,
Right?
But he recognized it as like the guy with the mask and everything. And
Yeah.
and it's also interesting because this soundtrack is for anybody out there who's into synthwave, and people have maybe heard me talk about synthwave on the channel before. This soundtrack, John Carpenter, is sort of like the founding father of synthwave.
Definitely.
I
agree.
Yeah, the bands like I don't know, who would be some bands that you would say are very influenced by the whole John Carpenter sound.
What is the Day of the Dead? Or no?
Dance
of the Dead?
Dance with the Dead.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Dance
Dance with the Dead?
Ghost Cop. No, I don't know. What am I thinking of? All that stuff is, yeah. I don't listen to enough of it to know all the bands.
Carpenter Brute.
Carpenter Brute, definitely.
Yeah.
Big influence there. I love Carpenter Brute.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
And this is as you're watching the movie with the soundtrack, I love the way that it's much like Jaws, that as soon as you hear the dun 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 dun, you
Right.
know that the shark is there.
Yeah.
As soon as you hear the you know
yeah.
that Michael Myers is close by,
Yeah.
and there's kind of different, and it's not like there's a million different. It's a very simple soundtrack. It's usually only a couple sounds going on at a time, but there's certain sounds that go with certain characters, and that, when you hear these reoccurring themes, it sort of situates you to where you are in the movie or what might be happening and what's going on. It really like sort of controls the mood of the movie in a lot of ways.
Sure.
All right, now how about the movie? What do you remember about seeing this movie? When did you see this movie, and what are your memories of it seeing it the first time?
I was so young at the time. I mean, it came out, what, 78?
78, yeah.
So 78, I was, 7 years old at the time when that came out. So I probably saw it shortly thereafter, and I just remember being terrified of the opening scene with the brother stabbing the sister. And I was, young, and I'm not supposed to be seeing naked girls on screen. And it was, it has that scene right there. I'm like, oh gosh, oh my gosh. And I remember, I don't think I was able to finish watching it. So I had to kind of revisit it later because it was like some kind of late night thing. And I only caught that little bit. And then my parents were like, no. So, but yeah, watching it later, got the full effect of everything, seeing it down the road. But that was the most effective part for me, is just the little kid, stabbing his sister and killing her. It was just like, what?
Yeah, that opening scene is great because you're sort of seeing it from his young Michael Myers' perspective.
The eyes and the mask and everything.
Through his eyes, and the way the camera is, it's very sort of bouncing up and down a little bit. You're sort of seeing it from his perspective. I looked because I was trying to remember myself when I saw this for the first time, and like you, I was too young at the time. I was only 8 in 1978, so I know that my parents didn't take me to a movie theater to see it. And I looked, and it was aired for the first time on Halloween I believe the night before Halloween, Eve. Of 1981 was the first time it was.
What I'm referring to when it's aired on television or something.
And it's funny. It's hard to imagine this in this day and age, where when a movie comes out now in the movie theater, a month later it's on DVD and you're watching it in your house. Back then, a movie would be in the theater and you might not see it for at least for years. Like Star Wars, I remember what a huge deal it was to see Star Wars. I had a friend that had, I think it was a laser disc that he had it on. Because I think, I'm not a Star Wars trivia, not by any stretch, but I saw the original Star Wars in the theater with my dad.
Yep.
And I remember what a huge deal it was when we were able to actually watch it in our house, because they didn't show Star Wars on TV for the longest time.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's funny, now when you think back that something would be in the theater, you wouldn't be able to see it then. And then this was before we didn't have a VHS player at this time, so when it was on TV, if you didn't catch it when it was aired that one time, that was it. It isn't like today where there's 180 different channels, and you could see Goodfellas. I could probably turn the TV on right now and Goodfellas is on, or you know what I mean? There's those movies that are just constantly on TV. Back then you had to you had to be there to catch it. The other thing that surprised me when I went back and rewatched this, I haven't seen the movie in ages, was how, it's listed as an independent film. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that it's classified as an independent film, and how low budget but effective it is.
Right.
It's very simple kind of camera work. There really is no special effects.
Right.
Even the scenes where Michael gets shot and he gets stabbed and all that kind of stuff, you don't really quite see it. It isn't like a gore type thing today where there'd be stuff flying all over the place and everything. Right. It's a classic, and this is why I love this genre of horror, the 70s and the 80s stuff, because it leaves a lot to your imagination.
Very true. I just watched the newest trailer for Wrong Turn that's coming out, and it's just a complete gore fest. It looks like it is, just based on the trailer. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot different these days.
Yeah, and I'm much more a fan of. I've mentioned this on the channel that I love Hammer horror.
Oh yeah,
like the old Dracula and Frankenstein and stuff like that. And I love those because they're very. It's a lot about the scenery in those movies. You know, the English countrysides, the old churches, the old graveyards, and stuff like that. And they're not gore fests. I'm not a fan of gore. I'm a fan of more suspense and thriller, occult type horror things. And this movie has that. You know, it isn't until when I was watching it, I made note of it. It was, I believe, about 55 minutes into the movie when the first person gets killed. I mean, besides the very beginning of the movie when his sister gets killed. Right. His sister gets killed right in the beginning, but it isn't until it's another 55 minutes later until we see, one of the babysitters.
Right.
Who was the baby? Annie. Annie is the first babysitter to get killed.
Jamie Lee Curtis is great. Yeah,
and this is her first role, I believe.
Right.
Doing this. And I looked it up because she looks older than she was only, I think, 20 or 21 in this. So she's young in it. She looks a little older than, a lot of times in these movies when they cast high school kids, it's like Grease. Everybody in the cast is like in their 30s. I had somebody on Facebook posted a thing about, if you remember, what was her name? Cha-Cha? The girl that does the dance at the end, that actress was like 42 years old when she filmed that or something. And she's supposed to be a high school, senior. So I thought it was pretty cool that Jamie Lee Curtis there in her first role, she's close enough to high school that it's believable that she's actually a high school student. Another thing I love about stuff from this era, and Rob Zombie, I heard Rob Zombie say this about how he likes to cast his movies in the 70s because it was just scarier back then. You didn't have cell phones. People didn't have cameras outside their house and all that kind of stuff. And it's true when you're watching this, like, I get a kick out of seeing people using regular dial phones,
right?
To do things. They're calling each other on the phone like that. The whole babysitter thing, like, I remember watching it when I was younger. And so if I saw it in 81 or 82, I would have been 11 or 12. And I could totally relate to it because my parents used to get babysitters for me and my sister all the time, and that was a common, the babysitter came over, made popcorn, you watched a movie and stuff like that. So I could kind of relate to, I remember thinking that when I was younger, it was scary because one, it's happening on Halloween, and Halloween already is like, scary. When you're a kid, it's scary. Yeah. And then the whole babysitter thing, I could relate to the babysitter thing.
That's funny that you bring that up because now back then there was no sense of security. Now it's like you don't need a babysitter if the kids are old enough and they've got their phones and they've got cameras everywhere outside the house. I never thought about it that way. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It made it more scary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like Amityville Horror, right?
That's one of Melissa's my wife's favorite films.
It scared me to death because everybody lives in a house, right? And everybody at one time or another, when you're a kid, sat up and you heard some creaking noise. And, the house that I grew up in, my backyard, and where my backyard ended was the woods. And my room was in the back of the house. And I grew up in a small mountaintop, Pennsylvania. And we used to leave the windows open in the summer and everything. So you could hear the animals walking around in the woods at night, and you would hear noises in the woods, and it was an older house, and like in the winter when the heat would kick on, it would make this weird creaking noise. It's hard for us now, we're sitting here in Tampa, Florida, to remember this, but the house used to make these weird noises in the winter when the heat kicked in and stuff like that. So when you have stuff like that in the movie, like in this one, we said like the babysitters and just the whole vibe of the whole 70s vibe of the thing, it just sort of brought me back to when I was young, and it makes it all the more scarier.
Those are the records I'm trying to find and try to get into my collection, but they're expensive and hard to get, some of them, depending on the titles. Like, my number one want on my highest on my want list is an original pressing of The Shining. It's just so hard to get it.
Wow.
Unless you're paying like $150 or more.
Yeah.
For one that's beat up, not one that's like sealed or something. So, yeah, that's a great album. I wish I had it.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Another thing I like about the movie is there's a lot of shots from like a perspective type shot where it's either over Michael's shoulder, he's like standing in the bushes, sort of looking, at what's going on, or at the beginning of the movie when he's young and he's going in to kill his sister, it's like you're sort of looking through his eyes. Ominous.
I don't think anyone did that before him, like that kind of seeing through the eyes like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah,
no, and it's done very, very effectively, and it's got a lot of the classic sort of 70s horror tropes in it, like when they're driving to the insane asylum, the Dr. Loomis and Nurse Marion Chambers are driving to pick up Michael to take him to his court date or whatever. It's pouring rain outside, of course, right? It's dark and it's pouring rain, right? You're right. In a horror movie, anytime you're driving anywhere, it's got to be pouring rain. There's, of course, has to be a scene where, somebody's running and they fall and all that kind of stuff and everything. But, so... and we were talking about the music, too, the way... The music kicks in when it needs to be there. Sometimes in movies, there's too much just like constant music, sound sort of going on.
Sure.
But when you have this sort of silence and then all of a sudden you hear the sound, the music kick in, it really gives it this ominous vibe that's just fantastic.
Another band would be Perturbator.
Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about them. Yeah,
I would think
him, right? That's a single one guy thing, isn't it? Perturbator, is that what I'm thinking of?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he has a drummer when they play live.
Yeah.
But
I saw him once or twice. It was great.
Yeah. So when did you see the whole movie then? Do you remember seeing the whole thing?
I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you. Like when I sat down and watched the whole thing again, like because I've seen it a few times since, just throughout the years. But just, I couldn't even begin to say because I'm old and stupid. I can't even remember.
That's the same for me. I don't remember either. I probably saw a little bit of it one time, and then next Halloween I saw the rest of it or something, because that's kind of again, before VHS and everything, you just had to see it when you saw it.
I will say the first time I remember seeing it from when it was released originally was at Mark Paradise's house, because we would go over there before we go out to the castle, and they were always playing videos or a movie, or we would, if it was a less crowded event, like at his house, because there was always a lot of people, we may watch a movie. But I watched it in the full film at his house, and that was the first time I'd watched it in years, and that was probably like 9, almost 10 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, where I really caught the whole thing again and like really paid attention to it.
Yeah. It is interesting watching it again through adult eyes, 2023 eyes.
Because I probably watched it when I was, in my teens or something, and never really went back to it. Maybe once or twice, but not in a long time.
Now, this isn't your favorite Halloween, though, of the whole series, right? You were telling me earlier.
I love it because it's like the stamp of approval for all the Halloween movies and all the horror films, but I just like Season of the Witch because I'm into witches. And
that's the third one, right?
The third one. A lot of people don't care for it, but I think it's great. There's no Michael Myers, but,
How many of them are there?
I thought there was only... Well, when you include the Rob Zombie ones, there's quite a few. Yeah. I saw the new one in the theater, and I thought it was pretty good. Like, I liked it a lot. I wasn't let down. The one prior to that, I didn't enjoy as much. But the newest one I thought was good. I don't know why.
So how would you rank this movie and for this type of genre, this sort of horror slasher?
The first one?
Type, the first one. Where would that sit for you? And
oh gosh, there's so many horror movies that I love, but yeah.
Does this break your top 10?
It has to. I mean, it has to. It's like the original, right? So
yeah.
It's like the one that started everything. So
yeah, and it sort of kicked off the whole 80s. Like, I mean, would you have Nightmare on Elm Street if you didn't have Halloween?
Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 is terrifying. I saw that in the theater and I was scared to death. It was great. Yeah, and it's not for little kids either. So, you know, that opening part with Johnny Depp in the bed and blood everywhere, like, oh my gosh, it's so terrifying.
But I don't know if you would have those movies if it wasn't for this. You know, this sort of kicked off that whole, this type of, you know, for slasher sort of horror
definitely
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like the old 70s style films and the Prowler and all these different crazy movies like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where this would sit for me because I think my heart lands. I kind of like I like the old Hammer. People have heard me talk about this on the channel, the Hammer horror type stuff.
For sure.
So I have a real fondness for sort of the classics, the Draculas, Frankensteins, and stuff like that. But when it comes to this kind of thing, rewatching it made me really appreciate it because, again, I didn't realize how simple and kind of low budget it was, but how effective it was. You know, it creates a lot of atmosphere with just dark rooms and the soundtrack and sort of the seeing things from a distance.
Do you have a favorite Hammer horror film?
I'd have to sit down and think about that, and that might be an episode where we could rank. I have a good friend that's it's a hardcore Hammer horror guy too, and it would. I don't want to. I couldn't put myself on the spot and pick one right away.
My favorite one, at least with Christopher Reeve's Dracula, is the Satanic Rites of Dracula.
Oh yeah. That's a top 10
That one
for sure.
is like my favorite of the whole Dracula series, probably.
Yeah.
Even though the first one is amazing, that one's just over the top.
Yeah. Yeah, The Devil Rides Out. That's one I like too. I just love that whole like 70s. That whole 70s thing. But yeah, but
Twins of Evil is another good one.
Yeah. But this one, yeah, it's just, again,
there's so many.
Yeah, and revisiting this, it really made me realize, you know, how and it's not very long either. It's only an hour and a half. This first Halloween, you know, which makes it go by pretty quick. It moves along pretty quickly, and it really only takes place, you know, you've got Michael Myers' house when he's young. They come back to it later when the house is all run down. And also that whole thing of the kids, the house in the neighborhood that the kids are scared of.
Right.
We had one of those houses in our neighborhood when I was growing up. It was an abandoned house. It was at the end of where development. It was back in the woods a little bit.
Right.
It was like this abandoned house and everybody was scared of, that people would hang around Halloween and everything. So that resonated with me. But you really only get his house at the beginning and after he's been put away. The babysitter houses that are, you know, across the street from each other, Lori and Annie, the babysitters. I also find it amusing that when Linda comes back with her boyfriend, Bob, that they just immediately go upstairs to the bedroom of this, not even their house. They just like, you know, their friend is, Annie's supposed to be babysitting, but she's not there because she's skipped out. Or she's dead, actually. Right. She's been killed in the car. They don't realize it, right? And they just decide to run upstairs and jump into the bed, right? You know, hey, that was the 70s for you. But yeah, and there's a scene, I think, outside the warehouse or the hardware store. They go to the cemetery when they realize that his sister's tombstone isn't there anymore, Judith, that he took the tombstone. But really, it's like the insane asylum outside the gates of the insane asylum. By the way, if you're into this type of thing, there's all kinds of people making videos of where these locations were filmed. And some of it's not still there. The Michael Myers house isn't there anymore, but the babysitter houses are still there. Nice. The where that gate was, it's supposed to be the insane asylum. That's still there. So there is still a lot of the same sites and everything.
That's so cool.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on the Halloween movie or the soundtrack?
You just had me thinking about having the spooky house in the neighborhood. It probably like sparked ideas for movies like Get Out and stuff like that, where it's like, you know, it's all surrounding the house.
Yeah.
These newer films that have come out over the years, just you don't want to be inside that house, you know, for whatever reason. There's something bad going on in there, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started filming about, or maybe we were talking about it here, I don't remember, the Amityville Horror, and how, everybody can relate to that because everybody lives in a house. And the way this is filmed, too, that neighborhood is Anywhere USA neighborhood. It's in a fictional Haddonfield, Illinois. It was filmed somewhere in Southern California, I think.
I watched some good YouTubes about that. It makes me think of The Conjuring. I love the first Conjuring film.
Yeah. So it gives you that sense of this could be anywhere. This could be anybody. You know, sometimes when you see these gory movies, Hostel and stuff like that, it's like, well, I'm not going to land up in a situation like that. You know, it's so far-fetched that it sort of makes it seem a little bit silly. But when it's stuff like this and you're seeing regular people, regular looking neighborhood doing regular type of things that you can relate to, it makes it all the more scary because you can sort of put yourself in that situation. The way little what's his name, Tommy, keeps seeing the boogeyman. He's outside, I see the boogeyman. Oh, you're just seeing things, And the way Michael Myers, I love the way he's always in the beginning, like, far away. He's like in a distance. They see him behind the bushes. Oh, yeah. He drives by in the station wagon. Yeah. That's another total set. And we had a station wagon when I was younger too. So that's another thing that makes me think of my youth.
I cannot remember off the top of my head if the scene where he's like behind the sheets with the laundry, is that 1 or 2? I can't even
That's
remember.
1. Well, when he comes up, when he kills Bob, he comes up in the ghost sheet.
Right,
and he's standing in the doorway with the ghost sheet on, and she thinks that it's her boyfriend.
There's one though where he's like the sheets are blowing in the wind.
Oh yeah, that's one of the other ones. Yeah.
Okay, that's probably in part 2. I think I can't keep up.
All right. Well, cool. All right. So here's our first Monster Movie Monday here. Let us know down in the comments. Yep, we got a... Hey, and for you music aficionados out there, music lovers, if you're not somebody who plays an instrument, a little interesting tidbit about the theme, that it's in an odd time signature. It's in 5, which makes it seem even more sort of offsetting and unsettled, makes it seem unresolving and sort of strange. All right, let us know in the comments down below. What do you guys think of the original 1978 Halloween movie? What do you think of some of the Halloween movies too? What's your favorite from the series, from the franchise? Let us know what you think of the soundtrack. Do you think it's as iconic as we do? So let us know what you think of the movie. Let us know what you think of the soundtrack. Also, let us know some other movies you might like us to discuss and cover here on our Monster Movie Monday. I think we're going to make it like a monthly thing. We'll see how it goes. Maybe a little more, a little less. Mike's got an awesome horror collection. We'll probably be doing a special on that at some point in the future too. So let us know what all this stuff down in the comments down below. And I'd like to thank Mike for joining me here at the Lair and having me at his lair.
Thanks again for having me. Lots of fun.
Absolutely. And till we see everybody again, make sure you stay spooky.